Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Like we've been saying, please introduce yourself on the chat. We love to see connections being made. We love to get to know where you are and what your business is. And if there's any way that Dina can kind of customize or tailor some of the information that she has based on what you share, she absolutely will. We're excited to kick off this new year with a new webinar series, which we're calling For Entrepreneurs by Entrepreneurs, where we are highlighting the amazing entrepreneurs in our community here at Pacific Community Ventures. And we're so grateful to Dina to be joining us today to kick that off. And before we get started, I just want to take a moment to introduce Pacific Community Ventures if you're not familiar with what we do. We are a nonprofit based out of Oakland, California, but supporting small businesses across the country. We work to connect small business owners with free volunteer advisors who can help you through a variety of different challenges and opportunities that you're facing with your business. I'll share out some information about how you can get started with that program in a follow-up email that I'll send out either later today or tomorrow. And now, without further ado, I'll just pass it over to Dina to kick us off with working with the federal government, an introduction to small business categories.
Great. Thank you so much, Morgan. I really appreciate that. And welcome, everyone. Glad you could take the time to join us today. I'm Dina Tobin, visionary strategist and marketing guru. My company is Dina Tobin and Associates, and we are an economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, a women-owned small business, and recently HUBZone certified. So 3 categories that you'll learn more about today. And thank you, Pacific Community Ventures. Go to the next slide. So most of the information in this webinar is from the Small Business Administration, where you go to be certified. So I strongly encourage you to visit the sba.gov for more in-depth information about the requirements for each small business designation. PCV is recording this session, just so you know. We can go to the next slide. So the small business categories are helpful for when you're applying for funding at the US government level, state, city, and local funding level. They also can be helpful when you apply for supplier diversity programs with corporations. Next slide, please. And before we get started, just thought we could all take a moment to breathe. Just breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. This has been a challenging 10, 12 months so far for a variety of reasons that we will not discuss. And just want to take a moment to breathe in and breathe out and just let all the worries slide off your shoulders, put them to the side. Next slide, please. And we just want to take moment to relax and focus on your business and helping your business today. Next slide, please. So why does the US government want to help small businesses? They understand that small businesses are at a disadvantage compared to larger companies. They don't have the resources, the staff, the funding to go after federal contracts, which require a lot of resources. The US government purchases more than $400 billion in goods and services from the private sector every year. So that is a lot of money. And each government agency has annual procurement goals for each major type of small business. So the US government wants to kind of level the playing field as best they can for small businesses to help them grow out of the small business category to a more fully open and competitive playing field. Next slide, please. So just as an example, the National Institutes of Health in fiscal year 2019 had a $39 billion budget that, because you can see it went up a couple billion the next year. And within that budget, they set their own goals. You'll see in red on the chart, and then in purple, their actual, what they attained. So they exceeded the goals they set in 3 out of 5 categories, small business categories. And in 2 of the categories, they came close but did not meet those levels. So if you are, so you can see if 30% of 39 billion is about 13 billion. So that's a significant chunk of change that's out there available to small businesses if you meet the requirements for the services and products they're looking for. And if you're in any of the categories that the service disabled, veteran owned, or certified HUBZone, if you're in those categories, you have an added advantage because they want to meet those goals, and they haven't. They didn't 2 years ago. Next slide, please. And what are the benefits for small businesses? Once you're certified, you are eligible for set-aside contracts. So that means contracts that are set aside just for small businesses. Larger businesses cannot bid on them. They can be competitive, where you're bidding against other small businesses, or they can be sole source, which means one person, one firm can win that contract. So that's a huge advantage to you, because putting together a contract is a lot of time and effort and money. So if you can streamline that process by certifying in some of these categories, that will save you a lot of resources and potentially get you more contracts. Next slide, please. Some of the other benefits are setting your company apart, adding credibility, the SBA Mentor Protege program through the 8A program. You can subcontract on large government projects. You're eligible for financial assistance through the SBA. And the SBA Office of Business Development offers training, counseling, and financial assistance to you. And many of the categories have a certain logo you can use on your website and other materials that will show your public that you are certified. And each certification has its own unique benefits. Next slide, please. So first of all, to qualify as a small business, you must qualify as being small. And the SBA sets industry size standards that are based on either the average number of employees over the past 12 months or annual receipts averaged over the past 3 years using the North American Industry Classification System, NAICS. You'll hear a lot about the NAICS codes during the course of this presentation. And again, you can visit sba.gov to determine if your business qualifies as a small business and to learn more about the NAICS codes and look up your industry codes. Each, for example, my firm has about 4 codes we qualify under, and each of those codes has a threshold for a small business. It might be, I know one of them is like 15 million a year averaged over 3 years. So they're usually quite high. If you're in a category where you're buying a lot of equipment like IT, it's even higher. So there's no way to know what the threshold is until you determine which NAICS code you qualify under and then look up what the threshold is. And this is all available publicly through the SBA website. Next slide, please. So my advice is to avail yourself of local resources such as Pacific Community Ventures. These are all either government sponsored or nonprofits or a combination of organizations that are, that's all they do is they help small businesses. They provide training, they can provide mentorship, they provide access to resources, and they have, a lot of them have procurement specialists who can walk you through this process. Because working with the government requires a special skill set. The US government is not known, if you've ever filled out a 1040, is not known for being easy to understand and using easy to use language. So it's no different in the certification program. It's even things that, I mean, I work as a writer and editor and I don't understand sometimes what they're saying. So when you have someone to help you and literally take your hand and walk you through the process, it's so much easier. And this is available at no cost to you. They will help you get the materials together, the documentation you need. They have their own checklist, and they often will submit that. For example, when I applied for HUBZone certification, the specialist had her own checklist, and once I submitted my application, she submitted the checklist behind me, so that sped up the process. And I got certified in less than 30 days, which for the government is pretty quick. Some of the others will go through, you'll see you self-certify, but just they work through, you know, they'll work through Zoom, sharing screens, so you can walk you through the process, and it may take, you know, a few weeks or something for you to get everything together, but you can get it done with help. So I would strongly suggest you do this with the assistance of one of these agencies, and PCV is going to talk more about that later. Morgan will talk about that. So we can go to the next slide. And you'll get a link later, a flyer later with the links to all these agencies. So to be certified, you need to register with SAM.gov. SAM.gov, SAM stands for System Award Management. And these are the types, this is the information you need to collect before you start registering. Again, I would suggest you work through one of these agencies, but just so you know, this is what you can start working on. Your NAICS codes, your SIC, Standard Industrial Classification codes, you need a DUNS number, and there are specialists at the DUNS organization that can help you with that, and your tax ID number. Next slide, please. And these are the 7 categories we're going to look at today. Women-owned small business, economically disadvantaged, WOSB, HUBZone, small business, veteran-owned small business, service disabled, veteran-owned small business, 8A, and minority business enterprise. Minority business enterprise is not a federal classification, but it's used outside the federal government in city and state local funding, and often in corporate supplier diversity programs. It's similar to the 8A program. Next slide, please. And you can qualify. Sorry.
I was just going to say, before we do continue, we had a question about just clarification about what the HUBZone certification is.
Okay, well, we will cover that, but HUB stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. So HUBZone is, you have to look on the HUBZone map. If you Google HUBZone map, there are geographic areas that the federal government has determined have not been the recipient of federal funds, even through either through businesses or just in the community. So they've designated these, it's like economically disadvantaged areas. You can't tell unless you go on the HUBZone map and put in a specific address, and it'll tell you if you're in a HUBZone, if your business is in a HUBZone, if your employee is in a HUBZone. And that's another designation you can have, and we'll talk about the benefits to that. You can have several of these at the same, you could have all of these potentially, be in all these categories. that you're not limited at all. It's just what you qualify for.
And then there was one other question about whether you know of any categorizations or designations for permanently disabled elders.
As far as I know, there's not like a disabled category, and not anything by age either. But it may be they fall into the, if it's a woman, the WOSB or EDWOSB. But yeah, they don't, not as yet.
Specific for the elders.
They don't have, yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
So the first category we'll look at is women-owned small business, and each of these categories has a government contracting goal. As you saw with NIH, it's 5%, and they exceeded that. That's the goal, but they can go much higher. Women-owned small businesses must self-certify and upload their documents into the WOSB repository, which is on the SBA website, or they can use a third-party certifier, which entails a fee. If you self-certify, there's no fee. And the benefit of being in this category is that there are certain industries the SBA has designated as underrepresented or substantially underrepresented using the NAICS codes. And they can set aside contracts for grants or grants, any funding under those NAICS codes. So if you research on like grants.gov or other government websites for contracts, we can go to the next slide, under that code, and you find something that's in one of those codes that's not set aside for a women-owned small business, you can request that it be set aside. So that's a benefit to you. So each of these designations has ownership requirements. For this one, majority owned by a woman or women, and they have to be US citizens. A woman or women must manage the day-to-day operations, and you have to be within the small business size standard in the NAICS code. And when you certify or self-certify, you have to upload documents that show women ownership, that the women are US citizens, and so on. Next slide, please. Do we have another question?
We do have a few questions. One is, how can you verify if you're already certified? Is there a way that you can list all of your certifications or see whether or not you are already certified?
Well, you have to be registered in SAM.gov, and within SAM.gov, you have to, like for these two categories we're looking at now, you have to have uploaded your certifications into the repository, and then you can check back in and it shows you, if it's pending or accepted. Some of the others you just you self-certify. I think the veteran one is also self-certified. So it's all within SAM.gov. So you have to be registered within that. There's no automatic certification. You have to do the work to make sure your firm is listed that way in SAM.gov. Because other firms will use SAM.gov to search for partners. So they may look for, oh, we need somebody who's a veteran-owned small business, or we want to partner with a WOSB because this is a set-aside and we bring these advantages to it. So it's not just for yourself, it's so you can partner with other firms. So Anything else, or is that?
We see another one that asks, when they apply for grants, there's usually only one NAICS code that you're able to fill in. Is there any recommendation that you have for that?
Well, you should be using that. You should have a primary NAICS code, that sort of an overarching code that covers your work. The NAICS codes, some of them are more general and some are more specific. So you need to search and find the one that fits the more general code. I've seen that where they just ask for one code. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Good question. So moving on to economically disadvantaged, WOSB. Sorry, US government uses a lot of acronyms, so you want to keep a running list. So this also involves a women-owned small business who's a citizen of the US and who's economically disadvantaged. You're presumed to be economically disadvantaged when you meet certain financial requirements. Your net worth is less than $750,000. Annual income, gross income over 3 years preceding the certification does not exceed $350,000. And the fair market value of all our assets, including primary residence, and the value of your business does not exceed $6 million. So if you are EDWOSB, you're also WOSB. So like a subset. So next slide, please. And as I mentioned, you can self-certify in these categories in SAM.gov. And there's online representations and certification application on SAM.gov as well. And I mentioned you have to post certain documents to prove that you are a woman and US citizen and so on. There are also several organizations that the SBA has approved as third-party certifiers. And they accept US Department of Transportation, DBE participant, or if you're in the 8A program, you would also qualify. And these certifications have to be uploaded to this repository, which is in SAM.gov. I mean, sorry, in SBA.gov. Okay, next slide, please. Do we have another question?
No, we're good for right now.
Okay, great. So I mentioned we'll be talking a lot about NAICS codes. So here we go. There are 83 NAICS codes that are designated as eligible for federal contracting under this WOSB program. Some of which they're considered underrepresented or substantially underrepresented. And as I mentioned, if you fall in these categories, then you can bid on set-aside projects for women-owned small business. Or if you come up with a project, you can go to a contracting officer and say, this is under, 76531, whatever the NAIC code is, and say it's in a substantially underrepresented code, and we'd like it to be a sole source or limited pool of competition. So this gives you additional tools in your toolbox when you're competing or bidding on government contracts. Next slide, please. So, any questions this time?
Yeah, we had a question that came in asking if there's a downside to self-certifying.
That's an interesting question. I mean, you do have to submit your documents to the US government. So if you have any hesitation about that, that might be the only downside. I mean, I assume everyone here is paying taxes and all that. So, if you have an EIN, if you're submitting your 1040 or your whatever your, the government already has your information. So there's not really, as I see it, there's no real downside. You are certifying, you are in this category. So if you lie, if you say a woman-owned small business and you're not, yes, there's a downside. You can get in trouble for that. But if you're truthful and you fit the category and you follow the rules, I only see benefits. I mean, the federal contracting market, as you saw, $400 billion a year, that's huge. And like some of the organizations I belong to are always looking like, oh, we're looking for an 8A, we're graduating from the 8A program, we need an 8A firm, we need someone in a HUBZone, so it opens the door for a lot of opportunities for you, if that's what you want to do. So I think there's just a lot of benefits to doing it.
And then weighing the difference between self-certifying versus certifying through the SBA.
Well, it's all through the SBA, but the SBA has third-party certifiers for women-owned small business and economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. So if you go through one of those third parties, there is a fee you pay to have them certify you. It's up to you whether you want to do it yourself or pay them. I don't know really what the difference is, but you end up being certified either way. So if you feel more comfortable having a third party stamp your documents and certify you, you can do that. I think it's maybe a couple $100. It's not a huge fee, but if you do it yourself, there's no fee. So it's a benefit.
Great, and that answered another question. So if you're doing it for self-certified, it's for free, but you can pay a small fee for those third parties.
And SAM.gov, there's no fee to register with this federal government. There's no fees. If somebody's telling you they're going to charge you to register you, that's incorrect.
We have another question. Can you repeat how we can suggest a project?
Okay, well, that's kind of a whole nother webinar, but in short, if you come up with a project, say, I don't know, improving the street lights in a park or something, the lighting in a park, and the Naics code for that is in one of those 83 codes for a women-owned small business. You can then go to a contracting officer whose jurisdiction is that national park and say, we would like to upgrade the lighting facilities. It's under this code. We would like, we'd like it to be a set-aside contract for WOSB. And you can try and make the case for we want it to be a sole source set-aside contract. It depends, I think, on the code itself and on the value, the cost of the project. There's a lot of different factors, but it gives you an opening to go and start that conversation with the contracting officer. Good question.
And good answer for the time we have allowed.
Yes.
We've got a question. One is, can you post the URL for the list of set-aside codes? Is that something that we have in that document that we'll share out after the webinar today?
I believe so. If not, you can, I'll send it to Morgan and she'll put it in the email.
Perfect, perfect. So we'll get that out to you.
Google is a great tool. You can always Google set-aside codes, SBA, WOSB.
And then is that the same as is the same place to see the 83 Naics codes for WOSB?
Yes, that would be the same.
That would be the same.
The same link. Yes.
Perfect. So we'll send that out after today as well.
We'll send it out. Yes. Thank you for asking.
We've got another question. How has these certifications helped you grow your business, Dina?
Oh, excellent question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have been in business a long time, but I've only in the past year or two taken the plunge and registered with SAM.gov. And I wish I knew about all these resources when I started, because I did it on my own and it was complicated. And so now and they recently redid the website for submitting the WOSB forms. So everyone had to reapply. Usually you have to recertify, I think, every year. But they changed the website, they upgraded. So I had to redo that. That one is fairly, I mean, getting the forms you need and uploading them is not, if you've probably done that on other sites, not that difficult, but getting through SAM.gov, all the pages of, you know, and you have to read it very carefully. Do you agree with this? Do you do this? Do you do that? So that's why I advise you go through it with somebody who can help you. And the HUBZone, I just recently in December, I think, got that certification. So I'm using it in all my applications to work with other companies. They always ask in the supplier form online, you know, which categories do you fall into? So now I have those three to just in conversations with other companies about working together. And I'm still learning about like all the HUBZone opportunities, because there are opportunities just for HUBZones, set aside just for HUBZone. So, and I have put in an application, as I discussed, about, you know, in a certain category, you can request sort of a special, since you have that special designation. So I'm still in the kind of baby stages of all this, but I'm really happy to have the designations. And I'm looking at getting a Gsa schedule, which can be another seminar, which is a way to Gsa schedule is General Services Administration. It's a contract where if you kind of similar process and you certify, and it's in a certain technical area, and then sort of a kind of retain or pre-certification agreement, so that once you're on that schedule, the government can call on you to do work under that schedule using those Naics codes, or you can go to a contracting agency and promote yourself by saying, I am on this schedule, I can do this work, you know, here's my idea, or here's how we can work together. So this is kind of the foundation of working with the federal government. It gives you that step up. In DC, they also have a I think it's called CBE program that I have to sign up for too. It's more paperwork, that allows you to get kind of preferential treatment for city jobs by being a DC-based business. So, you know, it's a big arena. So if this is like one part of it, and then, you know, you can explore in your own community, in your own state, what else is available. But it's opens the door to a lot of opportunities, I would say. Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, we've got a couple more questions.
Sure.
One is, once classified, what are the requirements for continuing to remain classified?
I believe For women-owned small business, it was fairly simple. I think it's like a renewal of the application. So they send you an email like a few months, I think, before it expires to let you know your application needs to be renewed, or I'm not sure if it's just renewed or recertified. So I think they ask you if anything's changed, you need to update anything, and then the same approve, pending and then approved. So it's fairly straightforward.
And on a yearly basis?
Yeah, annually they do that.
We had another question about the GSA schedule. Do you get on that schedule through sam.gov?
I don't have the answer to that question right now. It's a separate, you have to be on sam.gov before you would apply to the GSA schedule, but it's a separate application process from sam.gov. And I think the SBDC is doing a webinar about how to get on the GSA schedule in the next month or two. So I would encourage you to sign up on their website.
Awesome. And we'll include that in
question.
our PCV webinar calendar, and I'll try to find the link so we can share that one out too.
Yeah.
We have, how do we connect with a procurement specialist? Do we need to connect with a specialist per agency?
Not by agency. Procurement specialist can help you just through the a registration process with sam.gov and applying for some of these specialized categories. They can help you with the application process. So I think PCV does this, and I know the small business development centers, which are located throughout the U.S. There are also women business centers located throughout the U.S. So you sign up with them and you let them know what assistance you're looking for, and they will, example, I worked with one of the small business development centers, signed up and got a mentor, and then he connected me with a procurement specialist who helped me with the HUBZone application. He connected me with some financial, they can also connect you to financial resources. So to have a procurement specialist per agency, but just this is to get you in the system and get you everything signed up. Thank you.
Thanks. We have a question on the 8A program and a question on HUBZone, but are we going to be getting to that continuing the presentation?
Yeah, that's coming up.
Okay, so let's, I think we can take a pause from questions right now and continue through that. We'll get to these questions. If they're not answered specifically through your presentation, I'll interject and ask them.
Okay, great. All right, we can move ahead. So like I said, this is an overview. You need to go to sba.gov to get more in-depth information and connect with one of the organizations to help you through the process. So I'm going to move kind of quickly through the rest of the items. So the 8A program is geared towards socially and economically disadvantaged people or entities. And this is a very helpful program if you qualify for it. It can last up to 9 years, and it's really to give you a boost and move you up to become a larger company, because there are many set-aside contracts that are large or sole source through the 8A program. So I've worked with a lot of companies that have enormously through this program. But you have to be ready for it. You have to be ready to really devote the resources to going after federal contracts. the SBA will provide you with a lot of assistance, a mentor protege program, management and technical assistance, but you really have to be motivated that this is what you want to do, because you just have those 9 years, up to 9 years, and you can't do it again. It's not like the other categories where you can stay in it forever. This one, you have 9 years, up to 9 years, and that's it. So go to the next slide, please. So to be eligible, you have to be a small business, majority owned by US citizens who are economically and socially disadvantaged. Again, they have financial thresholds similar to the WOSB program, and the owner has to manage day-to-day operations. You can find more information online on the SBA Certify website. They ask you some questions to help you determine if you may qualify, and then apply online. And as I said before, I would encourage you to work with an organization to help you with this if this is what you want to apply for. But it does have a lot of benefits if you put in the time. And I've seen companies grow from, very small to, multi-million-dollar companies. Next slide, please. And the minority business enterprise, as I mentioned, is not a federal contracting designation, but it can be used in non-federal grants and contracts and corporate supplier diversity programs. The National Minority Supplier Development Council is the largest certification body. If you go on their website, they will take you through the process. They have regional organizations throughout the US, so you can find the one closest to you if you fall into one of these minority groups and other qualifications. So it's similar to the 8A, but it's a separate designation. Next slide, please. And then the veteran-owned small business, you can apply for WOSB set-aside solicitations. 5% of all federal funding is supposed to go to WOSB certified contractors. This is one where they have a special logo that you can put on your website and other, your storefront, other places. You have a competitive advantage. You can bid on what they call no bid contracts under 25,000. That no bid is you submit your name and your organization and the code, and you can potentially get that contract. So next slide, please. And then within that category, there's service disabled WOSB, and the federal government has a goal of 3% of all federal contracting dollars to this category. There are set-aside programs, set-aside contracts. Here, you have to be a small business, majority owned by one or more service disabled veterans, and that person or persons have to manage the day-to-day operations, and they must have a service-connected disability. Next slide, please. And you can go online to the Code of Federal Regulations and find out more information. The Office of Veterans Business Development can help you with this process. It's something you self-represent in sam.gov. And the Department of Veteran Affairs has a lot of set-aside contracts in this category, and you can be verified through the Vets First verification program. Next slide, please. And then the HUBZone, which I mentioned, is the historically underutilized business hub zone. So the federal government is trying to increase federal dollars going into these areas by 3% each year, 3% of federal contract dollars, and you get a 10% price evaluation preference if you're HUBZone in full and open contract competitions. So that's a big advantage, because often if you bid on a government contract, they open the technical applications first, and they can shortlist maybe 5 firms. It comes down to price. You get 10% price advantage by being in a HUBZone, so that could put you at the top of the list. You can also compete in other socioeconomic programs you qualify for. As I mentioned, you can be in a HUBZone, you can be women-owned, you could be a combination depending on the ownership. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, if you Google HUBZone map and enter an address, you can find out if your location is, your headquarters is in a HUBZone. Next.
We had a question about HUBZone. Linda has 3 locations for her business, and one of them is in a HUBZone. She doesn't yet have the HUBZone certification, but would you consider it worth it to keep that location so that she can get that certification?
Yes. It doesn't cost you anything to get the certification. You have to, if we go to the next slide, you have to, it's not only your location, it's the ownership has to fall into one of these categories, and 35% of your employees have to live in a HUBZone. So it's not just your office location, but if you qualify, it's a big advantage if you're going to bid on federal contracts. So I would say yes. I know people just move into HUBZones to get this designation. So, and they've changed some of the rules. I think they're like freezing because sometimes the geographic area changes over time, but they're like freezing the map for a while. So if you're in one, you'll be valid for a while, several years at least. Go to the next slide. Okay, so we're wrapping up. So we have gone over these 7 categories. I hope that you've learned a little bit about each one and identified potential categories you could compete in or be certified in. I think there are many advantages. I don't really see any disadvantages. There are also, the SBA just opened a new web page. I think it's called Ascent, A-E-E-N-T, A-S-C-E-N-T. A whole new platform for women-owned small businesses with a lot of resources. So, and if you're in these groups, you have the opportunity to work within those groups also. So it gives you another community to work together and support each other. Next slide, please.
All right, we do have some questions that came in.
Back to questions.
Back to questions.
Okay.
The first question is, we are certified WOSB registered in SAM. So what's the next first step?
Okay, so the next step, I would say contact one of these organizations, such as Pacific Community Ventures, and work with a small business specialist to determine, what's your plan, like what contracts do you want to go after, federal contracts, what NAICS code, can you narrow down? So you need, as I said, this is like a beginning, and it's opening the door for these opportunities. So it's up to you to work with specialists and just gather a lot of information and figure out what your marketing plan is. I should say my firm also provides marketing assistance and proposal development. So if you need any assistance in those areas, we provide that. We're not free though. We we are for profit. But thank you. Good luck. That's great. You're already on your way.
Great. Yeah, we've got a couple more questions. What is advantaged business enterprise?
Not disadvantaged, or I'm not quite sure.
The question was advantaged business enterprise. Yeah.
I don't think that's a category. There's disadvantaged or minority-owned business enterprise, and then there's economically disadvantaged. There is no opposite advantage. You're not disadvantaged. You're just in the regular group.
Gotcha. Does minority include LGBTQ?
From what I understand, I'm not an expert in that, but it seems to be more ethnicities than gender or other types of identities. So like Asian, African American, Hispanic, Native American, those categories. If you go to, well, the website that certifies the minority-owned small business, they list exactly who falls into those categories that they consider minority-owned.
Perfect. And we'll share out that the link to that site today too. Is HUBZone the same as Opportunity Zone?
No. Thanks for that question, but my sister's a real estate agent, so she's told me a little bit about Opportunity Zones. Those are designations by at the city level for, don't quote me on this, but it has to do, it's similar that they want to increase or give an advantage to companies that operate in disadvantaged areas or economically depressed areas. But I don't believe it's at the federal level. I think it may be a city. I know in New York City they have it, but I'm not sure. I would Google that. I don't. HUBZone is its own category though. Anything else?
Yeah, we've got a couple more questions. Let me look through here real quick. How do you know if your company is required bonding to bid on contracts?
That would be in the actual RFP or RFA. It would have the requirements for the contractor. And in sam.gov, there's also some questions about bonding, and like if you do export, or there's specific questions about those areas. So if you're not already in sam.gov, I would work with a specialist to make sure you're checking all the right boxes.
We've got lots of thanks coming in too, Dina. I'll interject the questions
Thank
with
you
the appreciation.
all
we do have a couple more questions if you have the time.
Sure.
Are post-incarcerated business owners considered small, economically, socially disadvantaged businesses?
Interesting question. Economically and socially disadvantaged is if you're women-owned, economically disadvantaged, it's about your financial thresholds you have to be under for the 8A program. It's a little more complicated or a little more in depth. It used to be different, I think, more cut and dry, but now it's sort of broadened the areas a little bit. So I don't, you have to look at the specific requirements for the 8A program. But I haven't read anything about, you know, former felons, if there's not a special federal designation, as far as I know, that would fall in that category. There may be, at a non-federal level, there may be outreach to that community. Interesting question.
Can you give an example of how an insurance agency can take advantage of registering for a certification?
Interesting question. Insurance agency. How they would take advantage, or can you repeat the question again?
Yes, absolutely. Can you give an example of how an insurance agency can take advantage of registering for a certification?
I'm not sure what you mean by take advantage. Can you add some more information to that question?
Procurement with the government.
So do you mean identify procurement opportunities with the government?
Yes.
Okay, because there's, we can send that later, the link to government opportunities. You can search on there's a website for, I know there's grants.gov, and there's a site for the contracts for US government. And I would do some research, like search for insurance and see what comes up, you know, or search, you know, find the Naics code that falls under and search by that. And you can search by small business set aside and see what opportunities there are out there. I would also, if you're part of an association of insurance agents, they may have more information on other association members may have gone after contracts with the federal government and could give you guidance as to where to look, you know, maybe bidding together, partnering. So there may be opportunities. It will take some research, and also these small business associations I mentioned could help you hone in on that information. But I mean, the federal government does so many different things, so it's a lot of opportunities. Even if you get a piece of a bigger contract, and once you start getting even subcontracts, you build up your experience and you learn how to, you know, the whole process of once you have a contract, managing it, and all the financial part of it. So it's, you know, it's a process. Thank you for that question. Anything else?
We had a couple questions about hub zones and how to identify if your business address is in a hub zone, and we'll include that link. Dina has mentioned that there's a map online that you can identify those zones.
You just type in your address. Yeah.
Perfect. And
it's very
we'll include
specific,
that link.
So
yeah, one of the questions was in San Francisco specifically. I think even within San Francisco, it can vary depending on your exact address. So best to go to that site.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
What are the benefits of being a part of the National Association of Women Business Owners?
I think that's that from, I get some emails from them. I think they're
Mhm.
trade association / lobbying organization. I think they represent women business owners in Congress, so that you have a voice in Congress as a women-owned small business owner. And they probably have other benefits, but they're always, I get a lot of emails asking me to represent them in front of Congress. So that's what I know them for. Anything else?
We do have a couple more if you have the time.
Yeah, I can stay on.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. Are there any websites for subcontracting opportunities for certified businesses?
I have to get back to you on that. I don't know. Some colleagues of mine recently started a business-to-business matching service where you can, there are several, these are all paid like subscriptions. You pay like by the month. There are at least 2 or 3 where you can, you register and you use those in name, and you search for partnering opportunities, subcontracting opportunities within the website. There's not really, like on SAM.gov, it's not really a way to do that. So I think you have to use these private firms, or sometimes when there's a RFP or RFA is issued, the agency will release, you sign up to get notifications, and sometimes you can see who else is bidding on it or thinking about bidding on it. So sometimes there's a way to see that list, and you could then contact those individual companies about subcontracting opportunities. There's a whole nother webinar on how to subcontract with the federal grants and contracts. Good question.
Yes, lots of great questions, opening up to more conversations. Kimberly asked what your opinion and what you think about working with a firm and paying the fee to handle your certification process versus what you did doing it all yourself.
I don't know all the benefits, like if they offer anything beyond the certification. I don't know. I think they do have some kind of like logo you get that you could use on your emails and everything. I don't know what else, but if you go on the SBA website, it'll give you links to the organizations, and then you can investigate and see what benefit is. I know at the beginning when they went to the WOSB, they were saying that, oh, you have to get certified through us, but that wasn't true. So that kind of turned me off to them. As I found out, no, we don't have to go through you. So, but a lot of people do. It's another, organization that I'm sure has some benefits to being part of it. And so I don't know if some people just feel more secure, or some, they'd rather go through a third party than themselves, or they're afraid of making a mistake. I don't know. So I would suggest you look into it. I can't testify as to what's better. I know which is cheaper. So it was cheaper, and it
and what it's worth to you, I'm sure plays a part into it too.
Yeah, it's worth to you.
One last question, and then we'll wrap up. The HUBZone map shows expiring HUBZones. I know you were talking a little bit about them changing. Is there anything else that you can share with that?
I read a little bit about I thought they'd frozen like the HUBZones for a couple of years. So I know one of my consultants is in a HUBZone that it was like last year, it said it was expiring as of 2022 or something. So they do change over time. I would just, as long as you apply when it's still valid, I think, you know, you're okay as long as it's valid when you apply, because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. I wish we did, but we don't. So as long as it's a valid, you know, HUBZone area when you apply, you're okay. So we just have a couple of slides just to wrap up. So that's my plug for my firm. Thank you for listening. I'm so glad so many people came. If you want any help, we're glad to help. We have a lot of proposal specialists, editors, writers can help you put proposals together. I'm working on some new ebooks for this year. Go to the next slide. And the first one's going to be your marketing strategy in challenging times to help you get through the pandemic and beyond. I'm offering a special pricing if you order before the end of the month. Use PCV1 and just email me. You'll get my email in the follow-up emails. We can go to the next slide. And a special thanks to Pacific Community Ventures, your organization. And there's one more slide at the end. If you'd like 2021 webinars, check out my website, dinatobinconsulting.com/webinars. Best wishes for everyone for 2021. Stay safe, stay healthy, relax if you can. And I'm going to turn it back to Morgan to wrap us up. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dina, for joining us. And like we've been saying throughout the entirety of the presentation, I will follow up shortly, either later today or tomorrow morning, with a video recording from today, as well as the presentation slides that Dina has walked through. And we have a document. Dina was so great to put together a document with all of these websites and links that we've been talking about together in one PDF. So I'll be sharing that out, like I said, later today or tomorrow via email for all of you guys to review on your own time afterwards. Again, thank you all for joining. Again, special thank you to Dina for leading us through all of this, and have a great week. Best wishes for 2021 for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.